If you're past the age of 60 and you feel exhausted day after day, even after what should have been a solid night of sleep, I need you to understand something very clearly right from the beginning. That constant fatigue may not be caused by aging. It may not be something you're supposed to just live with. In many cases, it's coming from something you use every single day, something most people never think to question, something sitting quietly on a shelf in your bathroom or kitchen. And that's exactly why this conversation is so important, because I see the same pattern again and again in the people I talk to and teach. Older adults who feel worn out, weighed down, mentally foggy, and slower than they used to be. Not because their bodies are giving up on them, but because their medications are slowly draining their energy without anyone ever connecting the dots. What concerns me most is how many people believe this exhaustion is unavoidable, that it's simply the price of getting older, when in reality it's often a side effect that no one has taken the time to identify. I'm Dr. Robert Harrison, and in my years of working with older adults, this is one of the most common reasons I see seniors lose their vitality. Let me ask you something that might feel a bit uncomfortable at first. Have you ever woken up in the morning feeling like you never truly rested? You get out of bed, but your body feels heavy and slow. You sit down to read the paper or watch television, and your eyelids start to sink. You try to make it through a normal day, maybe running a few errands or doing light chores, and by midday, you're already searching for a place to sit. Eventually, you start telling yourself, this must just be what 70 feels like. Or, I guess this is what happens when you're in your 60s. But here's the truth that most people are never told. Normal aging does not mean feeling exhausted all the time. It does not mean losing your energy before the day is half over. And it absolutely does not mean waking up every morning feeling like your own body is working against you. Over the years, I've seen countless patients come into my office with the exact same concern. They don't feel ill. They're not depressed. They simply feel drained. They describe it like a battery that never fully recharges, no matter how much sleep they get. When blood tests look normal, imaging looks fine, and sleep studies don't show anything alarming, the discussion often ends there. The assumption becomes that nothing is wrong enough to address. But that's where the real problem is missed, because one of the most common and most overlooked causes of low energy in seniors is medication. Not just a single medication, but the combined effect of several very commonly prescribed drugs, often given with good intentions and taken exactly as directed. I want to be absolutely clear about something. Medications save lives. They manage blood pressure, protect the heart, reduce pain, ease anxiety, and help people function day to day. This conversation is not about fear or blame. It's about awareness. It's about understanding that certain medications can affect an aging body very differently than they did years ago, and how those effects can quietly accumulate until energy is the first thing to disappear. Once you recognize this pattern, once you truly understand it, you start seeing it everywhere. You begin to understand why so many people feel tired without knowing why. Let me tell you about a patient named Margaret. Margaret was 72 when she came to see me, and what stood out immediately was not weakness, but frustration. She was sharp, independent, and genuinely trying to stay active, but she said something I'll never forget. She told me, "Doctor, I don't feel sick. I just feel finished by noon." By early afternoon, she needed to lie down. By evening, she had nothing left to give. She wasn't asking to feel young again. She just wanted to stop feeling exhausted every single day. We ran the standard tests and everything came back normal. Her heart was stable. Her lab work was fine. Her sleep wasn't perfect, but it wasn't terrible either. So I asked her a question that often reveals more than any scan or test ever could. I asked her to walk me through everything she took in a typical day. She pulled out a list: blood pressure medication, a pill to help her sleep, something for anxiety, an allergy medication she'd been taking for years. None of these were unusual. None of them were considered dangerous on their own. But together, they told a very different story. This is the moment when things start to click for many people, because they realize no one has ever looked at the full picture. Each medication had been prescribed at a different time, often by different doctors, each for a valid reason, but no one had stopped to ask how they might be affecting her energy when taken together. Let's start with blood pressure medications because they are one of the most common groups I see linked to fatigue in seniors. These drugs are extremely important, and for many people, they are absolutely necessary. But certain types lower blood pressure by slowing the heart rate or relaxing blood vessels. That's how they do their job. The problem is that in some older adults, this same process can also reduce how much oxygen-rich blood reaches the muscles and tissues, especially during movement. The result is a feeling people often describe as heaviness or sluggishness. They move more slowly, they tire faster, they don't feel as alert or mentally sharp as they once did. And because these changes happen gradually, most people never associate them with their medication. They assume their body is simply aging faster than it should. What makes this especially tricky is that the medication appears to be working. Blood pressure readings look good, so no one questions it. But energy isn't something that shows up on a lab report. It shows up in how you feel throughout the day, and that's often minimized or ignored. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, "My numbers are great, but I feel awful." That gap between test results and daily experience is a huge clue, and it's one we frequently overlook. Then there are sleep medications and sedatives, another category that quietly robs seniors of energy. This includes prescription sleep aids, anxiety medications, and certain muscle relaxers. These drugs calm the nervous system, which can be helpful at night, but they don't always shut off when morning arrives. In older bodies, medications tend to linger longer. The liver breaks them down more slowly, and the brain becomes more sensitive to their effects. The result can be morning grogginess that lasts all day, mental fog, balance problems, slower reactions, and a deep, persistent fatigue that rest doesn't fix. Many seniors tell me they sleep for 8 hours, but never feel refreshed. That's because sedation is not the same as restorative sleep. Living in a mildly sedated state day after day can drain energy in a way that's difficult to describe but deeply impactful. Margaret had been taking a mild sleep medication for years. No one questioned it because it wasn't causing obvious issues. She assumed that if she still had the prescription, she must still need it. But when we looked at her symptoms through the lens of energy, it became clear that this medication was likely playing a much bigger role than anyone realized. We didn't stop anything suddenly. We adjusted carefully and safely. Over time, something unexpected happened. She began waking up with a clearer head. Her afternoons became easier to manage. She no longer felt like she was dragging herself through every hour of the day. Another category that often goes unnoticed is allergy and cold medications, especially older antihistamines. These are commonly used for allergies, congestion, sleep, or sometimes just out of habit. Many are available without a prescription, which creates a false sense of safety. But these medications can enter the brain and block chemicals responsible for alertness. In seniors, this effect is much stronger. The result can be drowsiness, confusion, memory problems, and a noticeable drop in motivation. Because these medications are over the counter, people often don't mention them during doctor visits, and providers don't always think to ask. Yet their impact on energy can be substantial. Pain and nerve medications are another piece of this puzzle. These are often prescribed for back pain, arthritis, or nerve discomfort. Pain itself is exhausting, so reducing it is always the goal. But many of these medications work by affecting the nervous system in ways that dull more than just pain. They can reduce alertness, motivation, and mental clarity. Seniors often describe feeling disconnected or flat, as if they're moving through the day without fully engaging with it. And because pain limits activity, this can create a cycle where fatigue leads to less movement, which leads to stiffness and discomfort, which leads to more medication. Energy gets lost in the middle of that cycle. I want to pause here to make something very clear. Medications are not the enemy. The real issue is medication lists that are never thoroughly reviewed. One of the biggest problems I see in senior healthcare isn't dramatic overmedication, but a lack of regular reassessment. Bodies change, needs change. What made sense 5 or 10 years ago may not make sense now, especially when energy is disappearing and no one is asking why. This brings us to something most people have never heard of, but almost everyone experiences to some degree: Medication stacking. This happens when multiple medications, each with fatigue as a potential side effect, are taken together. One may slightly lower blood pressure, another may calm the nervous system, another may reduce alertness just a bit. Individually, these effects seem minor. Together, they can completely alter how a person feels. The effects don't just add up, they compound. And because prescriptions are usually evaluated individually, very few people ever look at the whole picture and connect it to energy loss. As we age, our bodies process medications differently. The liver and kidneys slow down, muscle mass decreases, brain sensitivity increases. A dose that felt perfectly fine at 55 can feel overwhelming at 70. Yet doses often remain unchanged for years, simply because no one has a reason to revisit them. Energy complaints are dismissed as normal, and the cycle continues. Here's the most important part of this discussion. Feeling tired all the time is not something you should ignore. It's information. It's your body signaling that something has shifted. And while you should never stop medications on your own, you absolutely can and should ask better questions. In the next part, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that, what a proper medication review really looks like, and the single sentence that can completely change the conversation with your doctor. Because once you understand how medications affect energy, you stop blaming your age and start taking your quality of life seriously again. Now let's continue right where we left off. Once you realize that medications can quietly drain energy, the next question becomes unavoidable. Why does this happen so often, and why does it go unnoticed for so long? The answer is simpler than most people expect. In modern healthcare, medications are usually evaluated one at a time, not as part of a system. Each prescription is written to address a specific issue, and if that issue looks controlled on paper, the conversation often ends there. Blood pressure is stable, pain is manageable, anxiety is reduced, sleep is happening. But nowhere on that checklist is the question, how does this person actually feel throughout the day? Energy is subjective. It doesn't show up neatly on a chart, and because of that, it's often brushed aside as vague or inevitable, especially in older adults. This is where medication stacking becomes such a powerful and risky factor. Medication stacking doesn't mean you're taking something inappropriate. It means you're taking several things that all list fatigue as a possible side effect. Together, they create a level of exhaustion that no single medication would cause on its own. Your body doesn't experience these drugs separately. It experiences them all at once. The message it receives day after day is to slow down, quiet down, and conserve energy. Over time, that message becomes your daily reality. I've had many patients tell me it feels like they're moving through water, like everything takes more effort than it should. They're not depressed, they're not lazy, they're simply operating in a system that's being chemically encouraged to stay subdued. And because this happens slowly, it's easy to blame age instead of looking deeper. Friends say, "You're not young anymore." Family members say, "You should rest more." Even doctors may say it's normal for your age, but normal does not mean unavoidable, and it certainly doesn't mean untreatable. Another important factor is how the body itself changes with age. The liver becomes less efficient at breaking down medications. The kidneys take longer to clear them from the bloodstream. Muscle mass decreases, changing how drugs are distributed. The brain becomes more sensitive to substances that affect alertness, balance, and mood. All of this means that medications you tolerated well years ago can suddenly feel much stronger, even if the dose hasn't changed. Yet many prescriptions are renewed year after year without anyone asking whether the original need still exists or whether the dose is still appropriate. This is why regular medication reviews are so critical and why they're so often missing. A proper review isn't rushed. It's not a quick glance at a list. It's a thoughtful conversation that looks at the whole person, not just the diagnosis. It asks whether each medication is still necessary, whether two medications are doing the same job, whether timing could make a difference, and whether side effects like fatigue are interfering with daily life. Unfortunately, many seniors never receive this kind of review unless they specifically ask for it. I want to share another example that shows how powerful this process can be. A daughter once came to me worried about her mother, who had gone from being active and social to sitting quietly most of the day. She wasn't sad, she wasn't confused, she just didn't have the energy to engage anymore. Doctors had told the family this was simply part of aging, but when we carefully reviewed her medications, we found several drugs affecting blood pressure, alertness, and the nervous system. Each had been prescribed for a good reason at the time, but together they were slowly draining her energy. With careful adjustments and close monitoring, her energy improved. Not overnight, but enough that she began participating in life again. That change didn't come from adding something new. It came from reevaluating what was already there. This leads to the most practical takeaway from everything we've discussed. If you feel chronically tired, foggy, or slowed down, the goal is not to guess which medication is to blame. And it's certainly not to stop anything on your own. The goal is to change the conversation with your healthcare provider. Many people hesitate because they don't want to seem difficult or question their doctor. But advocating for your energy is not complaining. It's being involved in your care. Earlier, I promised you one sentence that can open the door to a meaningful discussion, and here it is again because it truly matters. Can we review my medications specifically to see which ones may be contributing to fatigue? That sentence doesn't accuse, it doesn't demand. It simply shifts the focus from numbers and diagnoses to how you actually feel and how your medications may be affecting your quality of life. When that question is asked, a proper review can begin. A good review looks at patterns, not just individual drugs. It considers whether doses can be adjusted, whether timing can be changed, whether something that was once necessary may no longer be needed, or whether a safer alternative exists with fewer effects on energy. Sometimes the solution is as simple as moving a medication to a different time of day. Sometimes it involves lowering a dose. Sometimes it means slowly tapering something that's no longer serving its purpose. These are small changes, but they can make a surprisingly big difference. Energy isn't just about feeling awake. It affects balance, reaction time, motivation, and independence. When energy drops, people move less. When movement decreases, muscles weaken and balance suffers. Confidence fades. Social engagement declines. What starts as fatigue can quietly grow into a much larger loss of quality of life. That's why addressing energy isn't optional, it's foundational to healthy aging. I want to be very clear about safety. Medications should never be stopped suddenly, especially in older adults. Abrupt changes can be dangerous. Any adjustments should be made gradually and under medical supervision. This process isn't about rebellion or distrust. It's about optimization. It's about making sure what you're taking is still helping more than it's hurting, and that your care plan reflects who you are today, not who you were years ago. One of the most painful things I hear from seniors is the belief that fatigue is the price of staying alive, as if living longer automatically means living with less vitality. That doesn't have to be true. Many people regain noticeable energy simply by having their medications reviewed through the right lens. Not everyone experiences a dramatic change, but nearly everyone benefits from being heard and taken seriously. Let's go back to Margaret for a moment because her story captures this perfectly. After we carefully adjusted her medications, she didn't suddenly feel young again, but she did feel clearer. She could make it through the day without feeling completely drained. She began enjoying her evenings instead of counting down the hours until bedtime. At her follow-up visit, she said something I'll never forget. She told me, "I don't feel young, but I feel alive again." That's the goal. Not youth, but vitality. Not perfection, but presence. So here's what I want you to take from this entire conversation. Feeling tired all the time is not something you should automatically accept as normal aging. It's a signal worth exploring. Medications, especially common ones taken for years, can quietly drain energy in ways that are easy to miss and hard to connect. But with awareness, better questions, and thoughtful reviews, many people can reclaim energy they believed was gone forever. Before we end, I want to leave you with one clear question, because clarity matters. When was the last time your medications were reviewed specifically with your energy and daily functioning in mind? Not just whether they're controlling a condition, but how they're affecting your life. If the answer is "I don't remember" or "never," then that's your next step. Schedule the conversation, ask the question, advocate for how you feel, And if this message helped you understand your own experience or recognize what someone you care about may be going through, share it with them. Too many seniors are living with unnecessary fatigue simply because no one ever explained this connection. Energy isn't just about getting through the day, it's about truly living it.